Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk with Dani Nierenberg. Today, I get to chat with somebody I really respect so much, and I've had the opportunity to talk to her many times over the years, and that's Rosinah Mbenya, who is the Country Director for Participatory Ecological Land Use Management, also known as PELUM in Kenya. And this is a network that is dedicated to advancing agroecological principles among smallholders, farmers, and pastoralists. Rosinah, thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to meet and connect and look forward to a good discussion.
Wonderful. So, not all of our listeners and viewers will know what Pelham is. Can you tell us what Pelham does?
Yeah, thank you very much. And indeed, PELUM Kenya, which is the Participatory Ecological Land Use Management, it's a Kenya chapter of the PELUM Association. And basically, we are a network of civil society actors in Kenya who are in solidarity to promote or advance agroecological principles and practices among the smallholder farmers and pastoral communities. We are driven by the zeal to understand the importance of the human health and at the same time the importance of the ecological health. And therefore, with our network of 68 member organizations in Kenya, we are championing the agroecological practices and the principles.
Can you talk a little bit about what agroecology sort of, what it promotes and why it's important, especially for smallholders?
Yeah, thank you. And actually, the smallholder farmers form around 78% of the food that we eat. And also at the same time, they contribute to a great percentage. In Kenya, they usually say around 45% of the gross domestic product. So they're a very important stakeholder when it comes to the food. And not only in Kenya, but largely in Africa, we have a farming community that is dominated by the smallholder farmers and also the pastoral communities. But at the same time, these are a group of stakeholders who are very vulnerable when it comes to issues of climate change. They are also very vulnerable to policies and decisions. They are also
Hmm.
very vulnerable to systems that may make them to be dependent on systems. Smallholder farmer, they are basically having very small pieces of land and they need to make maximum use of it so that they can be able to get some food for their family, and if all goes well they can also get something for the market. So when it comes to decision in terms of agroecology, it helps them to make independent decisions whereby the farmer can, for instance, save their own seeds. They can be able to grow them so they don't have to really start struggling financially and ask
Hmm.
themselves, where am I going to get the seed from before the rain season starts? And also at the same time, it's agroecological. In agroecology, we also enhance the capacity of these smallholder farmers to be able to make use of their own biological inputs, for instance, biopesticides, biofertilizers, which are also at the same time very helpful for their own human, because being on the farm exposes you to impact of harmful inputs. And we have seen testimonials of farmers who have said, oh, I've transitioned from conventional agriculture because in my earlier practice, this practice affected my own health. Yeah, so it's important to understand that aspect. And also, I'm happy that with agroecology, it is overall promoting or enhancing a safe climate, which we are all
Right.
interested in, because agriculture is one of the largest contributors to the climate issues. But at the same time, agroecology brings in a solution to also be part of the solution of the climate action. Because I usually say at the end of the day, whether there is climate change or not, we have to eat as human beings.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about climate again in a minute, but you mentioned something that I feel like is very important, that smallholder farmers are vulnerable to policy. Can you talk a little bit more about that, the policies that are sort of, against smallholders in many cases?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, of course, these the policies that have been there, for instance, in Kenya, we have had just victory recently where we had the National Agroecology Strategy recognizing all the aspects of ensuring that farmers advance agroecology. And even the development of a seed and plant varieties act then took place immediately with that kind of policy to ensure that the farmer rights are enacted. Of course, with some of the seed laws particularly, we have seen a criminalization
Mm,
taking place whereby the farmer's rights to share, exchange their own seeds is not legally allowed.
mm,
But for example, in the Kenyan contest, just recently we had the victory whereby the courts in Kenya just declared that it's legal or it's right for the farmer to save, share, and exchange their own seeds. When it comes to some of the policies, uh, you look at the seed sector, it's so like privatized, whereby you have to have QDS systems where the quality assurance and all this, they are uniform. But you see, when we talk about the indigenous seeds, they are evolving. They may not be uniform. You may have seed that is having even three colors in the same seed, so it cannot be uniform. So those are some challenges. But I think over time, we have now recognized or many stakeholders are recognizing that it's actually healthy, it's actually necessary to enhance that safe space. And at the same time, I'll talk about um, harmful pesticides or
mm.
inputs that still find their way in most of the markets. And last year in June, Kenya, we had a victory whereby also our government banned around 77 products, which were actually banned in other places of the world, but they are still finding their way in the market. And they had been banned because of their impact. Some were linked to some health complications, health challenges. And when the government started, they banned around 77, and 202 were given restricted use.
Mm.
And I have also seen Tanzania following that suit. This January, they also were able to ban. So you see, those are products that farmers who are not agroecological or even agroecological, and they might find themselves in some difficult situation. They may
Sure.
hand, yeah, having those. So those are laws that are not having fair share for the farmers.
Yeah. And it's interesting in some ways. The policies for smallholders are better than in the global north for smallholders in Kenya and t Tanzania, as you mentioned. I'm wondering if you can explain to our listeners and viewers the impacts that you're seeing among smallholders because of the climate crisis. How are they being affected?
Okay, yeah, thank you. One of the major challenges we have is the water. Like for instance, I'll just keep on referring Kenya where we are, but we have two main rainy season in Kenya. We have the March, April, and we have the October to December rains. In the last October to December rains, the rainy season largely failed in most parts of the country, and even in the past, there's a situation where we had like three failed rainy season. Of course, we have majority of the farmers being dependent on rain-fed agriculture. They haven't been able to advance to systems where they can be able to irrigate and so on. So with the climate crisis, the water becomes very scarce. And with that scarcity, it challenges the productivity. And also at the same time, it puts more pressure to, to soil, because without proper water, then the soil becomes affected. The soil fertility, the soil health becomes affected by water scarcity itself. So this worsens the already fertile soils and makes the productivity even difficult. The other thing with the climate, we have seen also scenarios of situation where we have in the past we had like desert locust, we had the fall armyworms. Like these are uh, like they are calamities that we are not used to, and
Right.
come with this we have these emerging pests and diseases that all of a sudden they are able to come, and they affect the farmers a lot. The other thing is I want to focus on the issue of soil health, because of course sometimes, leave alone the water scarcity, sometimes the rain little does flooding, yeah? And also it washes away the fertile soils, it really erodes soils, and that exposes the agriculture or the farms to more vulnerability of the climate change.
Mm.
So those are the main issues that we are really facing. And also we have had instances where with the floods, we have mudslides, we have landslides, like some of the projects that we had in the in the some of the counties, even in counties where you can imagine we have tea and so on. We had instances of landslides. Of course, we are trying to encourage farmers to have more and more of agroforestries, to have ways in which they can ensure there's a lot of matching and all that, but that impact of drought still comes and impacts the already vulnerable conditions that they are in.
Sure. And agroecology can help build resilience to the impacts of the climate crisis, right?
Yeah, agroecology can build resilience. One, I'll start with the healthy soils. And soils, they are like the third, actually the second largest sinker of the potential sinker of the climate greenhouse gases, because they have the potential to sink. And if we can have more and more farmers really practice regenerative agriculture practices, doing a lot of conservation agriculture practice, making sure we have more soils that can sink the carbon, then that will contribute largely to the global scale. Secondly, with some of these agroecological practices, for instance, if you talk about the composting practice, they reduce the emissions that would have been directly contributed by, for instance, open animal manure or so
Hmm.
on, because there is a way you are able to um, turn that to useful products. And also, for instance, biogas, biodigester processes, all this in a way they enable us to be able to sink more. At the same time, some of the agroecological practices talk about of agroforestry, where you go to the farms and you find some farmers also have kind of trees that are integrated in the farms. They are also able to kind of support in that sinking of the soil. But the most important part of this is the soil. If we are able to all work towards healthy soils that able to sink the soils, and of course those more trees on the farm, then that will be able to squarely contribute to better climate.
Yeah, agroecology is sort of a powerful weapon, if you will, against the climate crisis. Rosina, what would you say to critics who say that agroecology can't feed the world?
Yeah, I think agroecology actually has been feeding the world, and it will continue to feed the world, of course, because if you look at the African food, we have been for a long time been doing agroecological food by default. And I could say, yeah, we have been feeding ourselves, because how much is coming to Africa, or who else is feeding Africa? Even if we talk about a few imports here, we have been feeding ourselves, and even most of these smallholder farmers, they have been feeding themselves with the food that they produce. Actually, I've also seen, sometimes the critics say it's only suitable for small scale farms, but it's not. I've also seen large farmers who are able to come into the space, and what we are also urging and calling upon is also more of investment in the private sector, because even in the recent past we have seen some of the private sector coming in, packaging some of these bioinputs, and it makes easier for agroecological large scale farmers to really make use of them, or those who really may not have time to do their own on farm inputs. And I think it's the future. And also, maybe I wanted also to revisit the issue of the climate action. If you look at the toxic chemicals that we are using, they are just directly contributing to more greenhouse gases.
Mm.
So if we are able to reduce or actually do away with those some of these inputs, I'm talking about pesticides, those fertilizers, all those that are contributing in a way to more emissions, then we make it a better climate. But in short, the agroecology can feed the world. Actually, right now, I'm in BioFAC at the largest organic agriculture trade fair, since I'm also an IFAM board member, and I'm happy to see the growth of the organic sector
Yeah.
and how actually it has been contributing to feeding the world in a safe way.
Absolutely. You said that agroecology is the future, and I wonder if you see, we've heard about young people not wanting to farm, especially in the global south. They see it as drudgerous and not, a career path. Do you see more people, more young people getting interested in farming because of agroecology?
The young people largely in agriculture, they are less interested in agriculture generally. But of course, we have those ones who are in the agroecology value chain. And I would say like for example, in PELUM, we have one of the projects called the Youth Action Learning Track in Africa, where we have seen a lot of youth coming up with their own innovations that
Mhm.
they're able to work on. Because youth are interested in those innovative practices, they're also interested to support the market value chain. And what we are doing is to mentor them and coach them and give them space to be able to do what they would love to do. Some of the youth, they may not necessarily want to be on the farm. They may not want to be just doing the same, let's say, crops that used to be grown. Maybe they want to venture into like mushrooms, things like
Mm,
that.
mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
so we are also mentoring and ensuring that that is possible. But I would say in the agroecology space, which depends a lot of on indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge, there's a lot of space for us to really work with the youth. Otherwise, there will be a knowledge gap. We either document all these indigenous practices or we directly pass them to the generation because you find most of the farmers are aging. In Kenya, usually we say the average age of a farmer is around of 60 years.
Mm,
And our population is largely youthful. So
mm,
we have some more work to work on, and it's a very challenging sector of the community to work with because you make product or you make projects or you're engaging with them, then all of a sudden you find they have suddenly shifted their interest. They have suddenly gone back to the town to look for
sure.
white collar jobs. So it's a very challenging sector to work with, but we have those few of them that are really interested, passionate, and who are able to support the cause of agroecology.
Thanks, Rosina. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about an op-ed you authored with Lauren Baker of the Global Alliance for the Future of Food about the lack of investment, the lack of finance that goes towards smallholder farmers, that goes towards agroecological practices. Can you talk about, sort of where we are with finance for agroecology and where we need to be?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. And in terms of financing, the investments that are in agroecology are if you compare with what is being invested in the conventional agriculture or even in other sectors, it's still very, very low. And I would first start also by recognizing that, for instance, the African governments made they did the Malabo Declaration, which said every government should give like 10% to agriculture. Of course, being a mainstay of most of the African economic pathways.
Right.
But I would say up to now, very few of, actually, I don't know which country has actually given that 10%. Even our very own, it has tried sometimes 3% and so on. But also, if you look at the global, for instance, the climate financing, you find that very little goes to agriculture generally. Around 4% goes to agriculture. But also, if you look at out of that, how much goes to regenerative agriculture is very little, around 1.5% of that
Yeah.
goes to regenerative. So there is need to really and ensure that we are tripling, we are fast tracking the investments that are in agroecology because there is a lot of work that needs to go into capacity building of many, many stakeholders in documentation, in ensuring that we are also making the right policies. We also need to ensure that we are doing landscapes transformation. Yeah, so also working with the youth and women. So a lot of work that needs to be happening on the ground. But since the investments are not adequate, there's usually that gap. But I think usually I'm looking forward to seeing more and more investments, more and more interest in the agroecology sector so that we can have increased financing and attention. Because you see, if I can take counterparts in the conventional, they sometimes having bigger muscles, and because of the financing that goes into that sector. Yeah, but I hope that we can have more and more financing in the agroecology sector. The only big aspect that we have been enjoying is the fact that we have like masses or grassroots communities who are huge and who are really knowledgeable and practicing the agroecological practices.
Rosina, you mentioned the role of the private sector before. Where do you see the private sector fitting into finance and investment for agroecology?
Yeah, sure. The private sector, one, they need to also come up with, for example, financing mechanisms which can enhance everyone to access financing. Yeah. And I say this because, I mean, different groups are already, they would love to have maybe is it loans, is it grants, so that we can have even more and more people on the board. And I appreciate the very few or some of them that are happening. Like we have the Nature's Redera Fund that recognizes innovations, that is able to support micro enterprises, startup, and innovative ideas. We need some such investments. We also need the private sector to come in and provide private solutions. For instance, packaging of these biological inputs. We have, for example, technologies like the black soldier flies, which could potentially help in cleaning the world. Of course, we have a lot of challenge with the food loss and waste
Mm-hmm.
and dumping of foods and all over, which is, I think, another challenge that we all need to address and eat responsibly. So those can be that kind of waste can be converted into useful inputs and it sometimes needs a lot of evidence-based assessment. I know the smaller farmers might be doing them on their farms, but if we have bigger private sector who can turn that into frass fertilizer, for instance, package it, being able to sell it, that would be possible. I've seen some efforts in, for example, we have the Safi Organics in Kenya, we have Region Organics, we have also other smaller practice organizations doing it like OAC, our own member organization, and Rodi Kenya, and others like Biology. But it needs to be really scaled up, and then so that we ensure more and more are available in various outlets. If in community X, I need to access those inputs, I can be able to get the organic inputs. Of course, we still cannot do away without training or ensuring those who want to make for themselves, they can still have that knowledge and make, so that we also don't turn to just saying, okay, just the packaging and the selling,
Right.
but we still have that knowledge. Yeah.
Absolutely. Rosina, I want to end on what will happen later this year at the UN Climate Change Conference in Turkey. Last year we saw a little bit more attention, not as much as we would like, paid to smallholder farmers and their role in solving the climate crisis. What do you hope will happen at the next COP in November?
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's a good question. Of course, I hope the COP will move into action. We'll have more and more action so that by the time we go to the next COP in Ethiopia, we can see real transformation of
Right.
all these climate discussions and we can turn the national NDCs into action and also globally have more and more attention, particularly also increasing financing and real attention to the smallholder farmers, real action to when it comes to solutions to what affecting the communities, and also more so in Africa, we need solutions that enable the communities to be adaptive to climate change. But I also look forward to a very strong focus on soil health. I
Mm,
look forward to strong focus also on indigenous practice and knowledge, and a very strong focus on the loss and damage discussions, and more so centered around also the smallholder farmers because they suffer a lot of loss and damage. Find a farmer, leave alone the farmers, even the pastoral communities, the cows, the goats,
right.
just dying out of all this climate crisis. So a majority of people are really suffering on this loss and damage. So I hope we can move into action and little solutions and even have adoption of agroecology as a real pathway in terms of the agriculture sector that will help us to address the overall climate crisis.
Well said, and I completely agree with you. Thank you so much. Rosina, where can folks find out more information about PELUM Kenya?
Yeah, thank you. We are very active online. We have our website, www.pelumkenya.net. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. We are also on X. We are also active on Instagram. So we are really online. So you can follow us on those sites. And if you visit us in Kenya, you can also visit us. We take you to the sites. Our office is based in Kenya.
Rosina,
That
I will be
is yeah,
I
Kenya.
I will be in Kenya. I will let you know the dates in March, so maybe I can and make a visit. It would be great to see you again in person.
You're most welcome. Look forward to connecting.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Okay, ciao. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Ciao.